Hello everybody and welcome back to another video today. Today we'll be going over a video topic that I've been wanting to do for a while. And this is best team for Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green randomized. Now this isn't my original idea. It is based off Mystic Umbreon's same thing with the same title, where he does best team for Pokemon Fire Kanto, just Kanto randomized, where he uses a random Pokemon generator and basically generates Pokemon, and then we have to make sure, and then he makes their movesets good for the rest of the game, so they can deal with the game. So today I thought I'd do my own take on it, and with doing the same thing. So let's jump right into this. So what I want to do is make it so that I can basically have a good team of random Pokemon that can make it through most of the game. Basically, I'll be putting in moves that they can learn by level up, or moves that they can get via TM or HM. So, without further ado, let's get into this. So since we're here on our random Pokemon generator, we're going to generate a random Pokemon. We're going to generate 6. I'm going to refresh the page every time to make it so it's, I don't know why, but just so I can, just for fun. So, yeah. So let's generate our first Pokemon right now. Okay, so for the first Pokemon I've randomized is Dodrio. So this is a pretty good start off. We already have a flying type, so we have a Pokemon that can just fly. So that's pretty good. Let's move on to the next Pokemon. For our next Pokemon, we surprisingly got Articuno, so that is also pretty good. But sadly, we have 2 flying types, but they'll both come in handy, especially since Articuno is a legendary, and that's also really fun to have, a legendary, even though it may be a little bit overpowered. So let's move on to the next Pokemon. Our next Pokemon is also a really good Pokemon, and this is Snorlax. I was not expecting to have Snorlax, but another Pokemon with a good diverse moveset, so we can hopefully make a really good team with this Snorlax at our disposal. And for our next Pokemon, we actually have Machamp. That's also a really good team member to have, since it's more of a physical-oriented, but you really do need a good fighting type for every playthrough, do you? And some of the moves that Machamp get can be pretty good. For our 4th Pokemon, we have Rhydon, another good Pokemon. It will get stabbed from Earthquake, which is possibly one of the best moves in this game. So that's pretty good as well. So hopefully we can maybe get some other good things just like Rhydon. Next Pokemon, we quite sadly have Flareon. Since Flareon's moveset as of basically Gen 3 isn't the best, it won't have some big use to us, but at least it is a fire type that can cover some of the bosses that are weak to fire, if there even is any. First up, we have Rhydon. I made Rhydon the first Pokemon because it's the coolest of them all, in my opinion. The moves it will have will be Earthquake, just for some stab, Toxic, because Rhydon has some really good defenses, and Toxic can be very good for stalling, Thunderbolt for water type coverage, and since we don't really have anything that's good against either water or flying types that get stabbed from it, and Rock Tomb for basically rock stab, which can do a good chunk to flying and ice types. Rhydon will do good against Brock's Geodude and Onix, which most likely will be in Rhyhorn at the time. He does not do good against Misty Staryu Starmie, but if you want to be risky and leave him in with, because of his Thunderbolt, you can maybe do that. He'll be good against Lieutenant Surge because of Earthquake is super effective to all of his Pokemon, and basically he can't be hit by it. He does not do too good against Erica since he's 4 times weak to her grass types, though she can maybe do damage. He can't maybe do damage to her Victory Belt and her Vileplume for them being part poison type. He does good against Sabrina's Venomoth, but since he's not, well, I don't even know if Rhydon's specially oriented, but he doesn't really get too good against. I mean, he can do decent damage to her psychic types. He really is the best for Venomoth in this case. He also does good against Koga's Muck, since all his coughing and wheezing have levitate and can't really be hit with rock type moves. But if you're playing normal red and blue, you can most likely hit them because of no abilities. He does good against all of Blaine's team since it's all pure fire types, and he does good against all of Giovanni's team except for Dodrio because he is weak to it, and Dodrio is not weak to any of his moves. For Lorelei, he's only good against her Jinx, since Jinx is Ice type and Rock Tomb is good against Jinx, but also that's kind of risky because of Jinx Ice types moves. He's good against both of Bruno's Onyxes, since they are both Rock types, and Earthquake is super effective against that, but don't leave it on his Hitmons and his Machamps just because they have fighting moves. He does good against Agatha's Golbat and Arbok, since Gengar, Haunter, and Gengar have Levitate, but if you're also doing Red and Blue, you can easily hit them with Earthquake. He does good against Lance's Aerodactyl and Dragonite, just for them being flying types, and he could do damage to Gyarados, but that's kind of risky since, well, because Rhydon is a rock ground type. And for Blue, he does good against Blue's Pidgeot, Rhydon, Arcanine, and Charizard, all because he has really good stab moves against them. Next up, we have Snorlax. Snorlax team's going to consist of Headbutt for stab normal type move, Psychic for a psychic move because we don't have a psychic type, Shadow Ball for enough because it's physical in this generation, and Snorlax is very physically oriented, and Facade just in case it gets hit. Try to cripple it with status condition. You do extra damage. Snorlax does not do good against Geodude and Onix because of him being normal type and him not having any moves that are super effective against it. He does good against Misty Starmie with Shadow Ball, since Starmie is part Psychic, though not really good against her Staryu, but you can easily hit her with neutral hits. He does no super effective damage against Lieutenant Surge, but if you get paralyzed, you can use Facade, which will do extra damage if you manage to hit. He does good against Erica's Victory Bell and Vileplume with Psychic, but not as well against her Tangela, but still can do damage to it. He does good against Sabrina's Kadabra, Mr. Mime, Venomoth, and Alakazam in this case, since he has Shadow Ball, which is super effective against Kadabra, Mr. Mime, and Alakazam, and Psychic is super effective against Venomoth. He does good against all of Koga's teams, since he has a Psychic move, and all of Koga's Pokemon are Poison types. He doesn't do as well against Blaine and Giovanni, since he has no stab moves, or moves in general that are good against it. He does good against Lorelei's Jinx again, because of Shadow Ball, and Shadow Ball is super effective against Jinx. He doesn't do good against Bruno's team, since his Hitmons and Machamp have fighting type moves. I don't know why I just said that. And does not do good against his Onyxes, since they resist normal moves. Though you could go in against his Hitmons and Machamp with Psychic moves, but you're most likely not going to outspeed. He does good against all of Agatha's team, since he does have Shadow Ball and Psychic, which all of her Pokemon are weak to. He doesn't do really good against any of Lance's Pokemon, but he can still hit hard on them, since we don't really have a good answer for any of his dragons yet. He also does good against Blue's Alakazam, Executor, and Venusaur, since he has a super effective move for each of them. Next up is Flareon. Probably not the Pokemon that you'd most expect someone to use, since of its utterly atrocious moveset, but we can make this work. It contains Flamethrower for a powerful stab fire move, which you should really have in a different Pokemon that isn't Flareon, but since Flareon's are fire type, you're stuck with it. Iron Tail for non-stab, but also a very good physical move that Flareon can benefit from for being physical. Bite for basically being coverage against nothing that is good against fire, but it's still good since we have no other super effective damage for psychic types. And also Baton Pass, just to change into other Pokemon, since it's not going to be really helpful just staying in all the time. Okay, here's the very interesting part. Flareon does not do good against anything until Erica with all of her grass types. The reason why is because Brock's rock types and Misty's water types have super effective damage against it, and for Lieutenant Surge, Flareon doesn't really have any damage for him. And most of them, and yeah. He does do good against Erica's whole team, however, because of them all being basically weak to fire. It also does good against Sabrina's teams because of the Bite being super effective against every single one of her Pokemon except Venomoth, which you have Flamethrower for, so you don't really need to be worrying about that. It also does good against Koga's team, since of Iron Tail being super effective on each Coughing, Muck, and Wheezing, since they all are poison types. Lorelei, it wasn't really do good against Lorelei since it's also weak to some of the water moves that she has in her team. But and besides, Slowbro isn't even part ice since it's not going to be able to hit it with super effective damage with Iron Tail. But it can do super effective damage against Bite, but that's still pretty risky. It doesn't really do good against any of Bruno's teams since Onix both resist and have super effective damage against it, and Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Machamp aren't gonna really be taking that much damage from its hits. It does, however, do good against all of Agatha's team with super effective Iron Tail for each one of her Pokemon. It doesn't do good against Lance, though, but you can maybe hit Aerodactyl with Iron Tail, but Aerodactyl also has rock moves, which can be also really risky. Against Blue, it does good against his Alakazam, Exeggutor, and Venusaur for being fire type and having coverage against psychic types. Next up, we have Machamp. Machamp's moveset will consist of Vital Throw for fighting type moves, fighting type stab, I mean. Dig for basically being able to, well, take more hits, I guess. Return, because you should have really high friendship with this boy by now. And Rest, just to heal back up to full. What else would you do with Rest? Machamp does pretty good against Brock's team since it has fighting type stab moves against his Geodude and Onix because they are both rock type. It does not do good against Misty's team since Starmie has super effective damage against it, but you can maybe do something to Staryu. It does good against Lieutenant Surge's team basically by having Dig, so yeah. He doesn't really do good against anything until Blaine's team with his whole team since they are all weak to ground. And he has Dig. Next up is Giovanni. His team has he only really does good against his Rhyhorn and Rhydon since, well, fighting type moves don't really do good against the rest of his team, and considering that Nidoqueen, and Nidoking resist his moves, you aren't really going to be able to hit him with anything else, and they also have super effective damage for him. He also does good against all of Lorelei's team with her Dugong, Cloyster, Jinx, and Lapras, though maybe Jinx is a bit risky considering she's going to resist some of your moves, but still, you do decent damage to her. He also does good against Bruno's Onixes, and you can maybe leave him on his Hitmonchan because of his good defense. Next up is Agatha, and he doesn't really do any good to Agatha, except maybe her Arbok, but she can also hit super effective damage on him with Arbok and Golbat. But maybe if you're in Generation 1, you can maybe hit her Gengars and Haunter for super effective damage. Next up is Lance, and basically, he doesn't have anything good for it, because Lance, well, most of his Pokemon are flying types, and Machamp's a fighting type. Next up is Blue. He does not do good against his Pidgeot, Alakazam, Exeggutor, Gyarados, Charizard, Blastoise, or Venusaur, but he can do decent damage to his Rhydon and Arcanine for having super effective damage against both. Next up is Dodrio, our flying type. Dodrio's moveset will consist of Fly, Steel Wing, Drill Peck, and finally, Tri-Attack. Dodrio doesn't do good against anything until Erica, being super effective against her Victory Bell, Tangela, and Vileplume. He also does pretty good against Sabrina's Venomoth, since flying is basically super effective against Bug. He also does good against Koga's whole team with Steel Wing, since Steel is super effective against poison types, and yeah. He doesn't do good against Blaine since he doesn't really have any super effective damage against him, but you probably will be leaving someone else on Blaine anyway. Next up is Giovanni, which you can do good against his Dugtrio, Nidoqueen, and Nidoking, considering that they can't hit him for anything. You can basically stay in there freely. Next up is Lorelei. Now, leaving him against Lorelei is pretty risky considering that he's a flying type, but since you have Steel Wing, you can maybe hit all of her Pokemon except Slowbro for super effective damage. Next up is Bruno, and leaving him on the Onixes are risky because they have rock stab moves, but hitting his Hitmons and his Machamp with flying type stab is pretty good though. Next up is Agatha. He can hit her Pokemon easily with Steel Wing, since they're all weak to it, and Dodrio has Steel Wing. Next up is Lance, and leaving him against Lance isn't the best option, especially as Aerodactyl, but you can maybe dish out some damage with to Gyarados, Dragonair, Aerodactyl, and maybe Dragonite. Though leaving it on Aerodactyl is a bit risky. Next up is Blue. You won't really be doing any good damage to anything except other than his Executor and Venusaur, but you still have something that you can deal with Dodrio. And last but not least, we have our legendary bird, Articuno. Articuno's moveset consists of Blizzard for Ice Stab, Aerial Ace for basically have a move that cannot miss, Water Pulse for stab against fire types, and Hail just so Blizzard can't miss. Articuno does not do good against Brock's team, considering that they are rock types and have super effective damage against it. This will also do good against Misty's team, since it has no super effective damage for Staryu and Starmie. Nor does it have anything good for Lieutenant Surge, considering that they all have electric type stab, which, if you didn't know, Articuno is weak to. Next up is Erica, and Articuno has stab in 2 departments for all of her Pokemon, so that's pretty good. Next up is Sabrina, and the same with Venomoth has stab in 2 departments as well, that is super effective against Venomoth. And maybe you can do some stuff to Kadabra, Mr. Mime, and Alakazam, but since you have a good special stat if this is Gen 1, they also have good special stats, and that's not going to be doing too much. But if this is Generation 3, you're doing pretty good against her as well. Next up is Koga. No super effective damage against all of his poison types, but leaving it on his poison types is not really a bad idea. Next up is Blaine, and while you have Water Pulse, leaving it on fire types is not the smartest idea ever, since you are part ice. Next up is Giovanni, and it has super effective damage against Dugtrio, Nidoqueen, and Nidoking with Blizzard and Water Pulse. And you can maybe do stuff to Rhyhorn and Rhydon, but you already have other Pokemon for that, and why risk it? Next up is Lorelei, and Articuno doesn't have super effective damage for any of her Pokemon, considering that they are ice types, and Articuno is an ice type. And also, they all 4 times resistor attacks, except for Slowbro and Jinx. Next up is Bruno, and you can do decent damage to his Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Machamp with the flying type stab that you should have. Maybe leaving it on his Onyxes isn't a bad idea, but they can still take you down with 4 times super effective rock attacks. Next up is Agatha, and it only really has super effective damage against her Golbat, but since it is a Articuno, leaving it on Pokemon that do not have super effective damage in return can also be pretty good. Next up is Lance, and this is probably the best person for Lance, considering it is good against all his 3 dragons, and it can also hit neutral hits on Gyarados, and it has super effective damage against Aerodactyl. And lastly is Blue. It does good against his Pidgeot, Executor, and Venusaur, and if you want to, you can leave it in on Charizard, Arcanine, and Gyarados, but Charizard and Arcanine are pretty risky since it is Ice type and they are Fire types. Kanto Randomized. This may be a fun team I could maybe do sometime in the future for an actual Let's Play, which would be quite cool. So, since this is over, I guess I better get going, and I hope you enjoyed, and please stay tuned for next episodes like this. Bye!